Hello, Year One. It's Mr. Butcher from St. Richard Reynolds. Mrs. O'Byrne asked me to talk to you about castles because I hear you're talking about castles and learning about them. So, because I teach history, she asked me to speak to you about them and to tell you a few things about what they were and why people had castles. So, what are castles? Well, castles, a long time ago, used to just be houses, really. A lot of people would just live in them. They were also really important places to protect you, and so you could stay safe if it was dangerous outside. But where did they start, and why would people build castles? Why would you have castles in the first place? Well, the first castles were built next to towns where lots of people would live to give them a place to be safe if they needed to be. And the first castles actually weren't ones that you might think. The first castles were made out of wood, and they were called a Mott and Bailey castle. So a Mott and Bailey castle. And they would look a little bit like this. Now, the Mott and Bailey castle would be made of wood, as you can see, and it would have a wooden wall around a big ditch, and so they'd dig a big hole to protect people, and they'd have a drawbridge there. Now, you'd have people in their houses there, and you'd maybe keep some pigs and some cows and chickens for food. You'd get a bit of a well so you can have some water, but then if it was dangerous, you would go up into the keep. Now, that's part of the castle called the Mott, and this part was called the Bailey. So that's where you would go if you were worried or scared, or if it was dangerous. So those were the first castles built, was a Mott and Bailey castle. And there were hundreds, loads and loads of these around the United Kingdom and England. There's loads of them. And the thing is, they could be built very, very quickly because it's made out of wood. And so that was really, really good. The only problem is, because it's made out of wood, you can knock it down quite easily. So they would eventually start building bigger castles and stronger castles. And they'd make those castles out of stone. They'd make those castles out of stone. And they'd eventually build castles that look a bit more like what you might know. That there is a stone keep castle, where you'd have walls made out of stone, and you'd have a drawbridge, and you'd have a moat filled with water so people couldn't get into the walls. And you'd also have the keep. Now, in the last castle I showed you, it was all made out of wood. This is all made out of stone, which means it's a lot stronger and a lot more difficult to get in. But it was also a lot bigger. And you'd have all kinds of kind of rooms in there. So you'd have people's bedrooms, you'd have the toilet, that's where you go to the toilet in there. You'd also have the dining room and the great hall where dozens of people, lots of people would eat food at the same time. You'd also have the dungeon, where if you were naughty, you would go into the dungeon. And it'd hold a lot of people in these stone castles. And it was a lot better to protect people. And it was a lot safer. So that was a stone keep castle. Now, a very famous stone keep castle is, Year One, there we go, is Windsor Castle. Now, you might have seen Windsor Castle because that's where the Queen lives sometimes. She lives there, and you might have been there, or you might have seen it. And I think you were going to have a school trip there at some point. We'll see what happens when we go back to school. But that's Windsor Castle. It's quite close. It's quite local. And the Queen still lives there to this day. She lives in a few places, but she lives there sometimes. And I think she's actually there now, whilst, we're all staying in our houses. She's actually staying in Windsor Castle with her husband, Prince Philip. And Windsor Castle is a very famous one. It's, again, very, very big, and it's made out of stone. And it's a very, very old castle as well. It's one of the oldest castles in England. Now, how would you kind of get into a castle like Windsor Castle? Or how would you get into a stone keep castle? Now, the easiest way to get in a castle is to knock on the door and ask if you can come in. Now, they might let you in, or if you're not allowed in, you don't really have many other options other than to break in or to go to war and have an army and either kind of break your way in, or wait and ask politely. So how would they get in? Well, you can use a thing called, there we go, a battering ram. And that is a battering ram. You would go up to the door and you would ram the door with that big piece of wood there. It would move forward and backwards, and it would knock down the door. And then you could run in with your army, and you could kind of take the place over. The other one is if you had a catapult. Now, a catapult is like this, where you would pull that little lever back there, you'd put a stone on it, and then you'd fire it, and it would fire at the wall, and then the wall would fall down if you kept doing it. Then when the wall was down, so say if we take the Stone Keep Castle here, if the wall fell down, you could either swim across and then go through the hole in the wall, or you'd be able to kind of, if they didn't have the water there, you'd just be able to just run through it. So that's how you get into a castle during kind of what they used to call a siege, when there'd be kind of an army outside. But really, these are very, very safe places, and they're very good places to be. And they developed a lot more. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish talking year one, because I'm hoping that's not too much information, but I'm sure Mrs. O'Byrne will come back to me with some questions that you might ask her about castles, and I can make another video where I answer your questions and give you a bit more information about castles. But I hope that's given you a little bit of an understanding about what castles were and how they started. So stay safe, year one. I hope everyone's okay at home. I hope you're enjoying yourself and okay. And I'm sure we will see you all very, very soon. So goodbye, year one, from Mr. Butcher. Bye-bye.